Today's COVID update is brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price but stay for the service.
And we're back.
Yes, and so we're back, and as we promised earlier, we have with us President of the Public Service Union, my brother from Belmopan, Mr. Dean Flowers. Mr. Flowers, good morning and welcome on set. I think it's been a while since you've actually been in studio with us, correct?
Yes, a couple months, Paul.
Yes, a couple months.
But good morning, Belize, and thanks very much for having me, and I look forward to the conversation this morning.
Obviously, we're here to discuss some very serious issues in a limited span of time, and we want to capitalize on that. So jumping right in, if you wouldn't mind, on the topic of the DHS and the splitting of that, the dividing of that office. Just your initial thoughts and the position that your union has taken on seeing this move by the government.
Okay. As it relates to the position of the DHS, and I want us to be very clear about when we speak on that position and the recent amendment, in that we do our best to address the processes within the public service rather than who is being affected. Right. And so from a public service union standpoint, the only point in time that we will put forward a defense for an individual is before the commission or before any other disciplinary body or whatever we need to provide that representation. What concerns us as it relates to this current situation is the manner in which it is being done. And I say that because we've seen precedents set whereby one HOD, speaking specifically about the control of customs posts, whereby that was changed from a 106 position to a 107 position. It politicizes the post. It also disenfranchises ordinary public officers who are of the belief and who have the right to matriculate into those heads of department position. So that is where the Public Service Union is concerned about. Now, when we look at the DHS post, it is being split, but we still do not know the specifics of how the entire ministry will be reorganized. We don't know who will be placed, and all that we can hope for is that qualified people will be placed and people who are deserving of those posts. So I don't want people to think that our position is in defense of the holder of the office, but rather we're in defense of the process in which the government has undertaken to address the current holder of the office.
There's much speculation about the route, what was introduced in the House yesterday, that essentially these amendments where the one role of the DHS is separated into two separate roles, Director of Health Services and Allied Health and Director of Public Health and Wellness, that while if you look at it on the surface, it seems to be a logical approach to split the responsibility, but many will speculate and say this is simply a means to an end to be able to remove the current person holding the DHS post. Do you share that opinion?
I must and I absolutely share that opinion because that is the fact. It is the fact that the current individual or the current holder of that office, for whatever reason, there seems to be personality differences. I am clueless about what is the current holder's crime against this administration.
Have you had engagements with him?
I have had several engagements with him, and I want to debunk the ministry's and the government's assertion that there is too many rules for this one individual. So unfortunately, I just got a hold of this. This is the organizational structure of the Ministry of Health. And you'll see, Marlene, that there is the DHS at the top who answers to the CEO. Supporting the DHS, you have a deputy DHS who is responsible for nursing, licensing of nurses, of course, family and community health, accreditation, dental health, GOB, pharmacy, Southern Regional and Western Regional. That's a deputy director that deals with all of those. You have another deputy director of Health Services, and the first person that I spoke of is currently Nurse Bell. You have Dr. Mori, Deputy Director of Health Services. He's responsible for epidemiology and surveillance, nutrition, vector control, public health, Central Medical Lab, Northern and Central Region. That's his portfolio. Then you have the Director of Policy and Planning and Prospect Management, who is Dr. Zuniga. He's responsible for health partners and prospect management. The DHS post, as you can see here, directly responsible for NDAC, control of medical stores, health and information system, and drug inspector. So this nonsense that the government is now putting out there, that there is so much for this one post and that this one individual. Now, was the current holder micromanaging? It could be, but isn't it then the duty of the CEO to ensure that that micromanagement, if that is what was happening, stops, and that these individuals are held accountable in accordance with their portfolio, in accordance with what we're paying them to do?
That's an interesting point that you're making. So what you are putting forward is that essentially the roles were already separated based on the deputy DHS that was in place, and the other roles that have been designated here. It's too small for me to read.
Yes.
But the other point though is the issue of replacing the Director of Health Services is a process as a public officer, and it seems to be one that could not be resolved all these months later.
Unfortunately, it could not have been resolved because clearly the leadership within the Ministry of Health, whether it be the minister or the CEO, did not take the time to understand the structure within the Ministry of Health, as is taking place within many government ministries. It is not only in the Ministry of Health that we're having these interferences with the professionals who are supposed to do their job. And we keep speaking about the need for CEOs, and including ministers, to be indoctrinated, properly indoctrinated, to understand how the service functions, so that we do not go through these costly exercises. Because at the end of the day, this process will cost the Belizean people a lot of money, and it may very well cost us lives, because there is now a disruption in the provision of service, and very important services for that matter. I can tell you that since the sidelining of the current DHS, I'm pretty quite sure you guys have heard little or next to nothing of the deputy DHSs. So where have they been, and what are they doing? There's currently the same level of interference within the Central Medical Lab, and that is concerning for me, because we're dealing with COVID. We're dealing with COVID, and here we have a Minister of Health, and from time to time we see the CEO. I really don't know to what extent she operates and acts in the ministry, because really and truly she has been missing in action. But I have here September 3rd, 2021. The CEO in the Ministry of Health writes to a medical laboratory officer and says to him, "You are now the boss in the Central Medical Lab. You are now the boss, effective September the 3rd. Now, she has no such authority. Any authority to appoint and act rests with the commission. Only the commission can appoint you, can act, can discipline you, can fire you, and can appoint you to act. Here we have a memo from the Ministry of Public Service via the Public Service Commission, who appointed another officer to be the head of the Central Medical Lab. So clearly they're having problem with the acting director of medical lab. So what did they do? They illegally appoint their own, using their own appointment, September. So I am saying, Marlene, that the issues unfolding within the Ministry of Health is bigger than the DHS, and it is not only the DHS that is being affected by the kind of high-handed and heavy-handed approach that the government is undertaking currently, as we can see clearly there. If it is that, as the Prime Minister said and as the Minister of Public Service said, that the role was too big, I can say to you that just recently, when the deputy comptroller was installed, they increased the amount of assistant controllers to 9. We now have 9 assistant deputy comptroller of customs. They increased the amount of deputy comptroller of customs from 2 to 4 because there was always 2 and they had 1 post vacant. So now we have 13 people, assistant and deputy, supporting the control of customs to ensure that that office and that unit functions properly. Isn't it the same thing then, and the same approach that we should have exercised in dealing with these individuals? So this situation in the Ministry of Health is a personal one, and it has nothing to do with efficiency and improving health services. No other than the Pan American Health Organization, PAHO, and the World Health Organization, funded by the World Bank, was working on an integrated health services. This is, if you notice this paper, 18th to the 19th of February 2020.
Last year.
Yeah, last year. COVID stopped this. The PAHO delegation was in country, and they were assessing the current structure in the Ministry of Health. They were doing an assessment of how the regions were functioning, and then they would have embarked to further improve that. So there's a concept paper on what needs to happen within the Ministry of Health by PAHO and WHO. So what we're seeing currently is an administration that's getting its way rather than being guided. They talk about being guided by science and being guided by the experts. Clearly nobody took the time to read this concept paper from PAHO.
Does this concept note outline, I haven't seen it, so I'll ask, does it outline the organizational structure of the Ministry of Health?
No, if you look at the front page, it speaks about the 3 components. And after they would have, after they would have addressed those 3 components, then the issue of human resource allotment and assignment would have taken place, because it is from this very concept paper that we came up with the whole concept of regional managers and so on. And because what I understand from this concept paper is that it also attempts to make these regions autonomous and let them be able to function effectively. So you have to hold people accountable. Have they tampered with that? Yes, because I can tell you, as I made comment earlier last week, the Ministry of Public Service continues to utilize its authority, which is vested within that ministry, to appoint regional managers. But we currently see, just like we are seeing with the acting director of lab services, whereby individuals who have no authority from the Ministry of Public Service now controlling these regional centers. So it's chaos, and my concern is not, I'm not concerned about the individuals, I'm concerned about the process and how it affects the quality of service that people are receiving.
Yeah. And I guess that's my next question, because when you have, as you've brought with your documentation today, processes that have been circumvented that you know must be employed for the establishment of these particular roles or for the appointments in these particular roles, what is the role of the union at that point?
And that is why we're having this conversation today, because unfortunately it is until thing collapses, it is until people start to be negatively affected that they come to the union and they provide to the union these supporting documentation. The union, while we have membership in almost every single department and ministry, the information is not always forthcoming, and unfortunately we have to have a crisis for people to come forward and produce the kind of information to highlight where the administration is going wrong and awry. Why this fear in the public service, Marlene? People blame it primarily on victimization and politicization. I acknowledge that.
Well, I was going to say, let's not pretend that there aren't persons who are appointed to posts in the past under both administrations. It has been a practice. The practices that have been continued in the country that were not helpful towards being able to have the type of development we want.
We cannot shy away from the fact that the public service has been politicized.
Yes.
We cannot shy, and that's why the Public Service Union has written to the House Committee where the 10th Amendment is concerned. to say to them, your proposal for the restructuring of the Public Service Commission is flawed, and it simply continues the politicization. The Public Service Commission should be insulated from anything politics. They are not to be influenced by anybody. It is clear within the Constitution. Their decision making is supposed to be at all times autonomous and never influenced by any outside forces. So what we are saying where the 10th Amendment is concerned, and if we could fix the Public Service Commission and insulate that body and provide for that commission to have its own secretariat, then we would be on our way, Marlene, to stop this nonsense of appointing people and promoting people who are not qualified to those posts. But it starts there. And so
but coming back to the commission, do you believe that it is that autonomous body today?
It is not autonomous. It is not an autonomous body. I can say to you that currently, because the Ministry of Public Service functions as the secretariat of the commission, cases are stalled. The commission deliberately stalled. As a matter of fact, we have proof to show that under the past administration, there were individuals within the Ministry of Public Service signing on commission letterhead without the commission even knowing that case not reached there. And that is the current situation now. I can tell you, since taking up the presidency, we have written to the commission on several matters. And we get a response from the Ministry of Public Service to say, we don't feel, or we're responding on behalf of the commission, but we didn't write to you. We have exhausted the process where the Ministry of Public Service is considered. So we have to go to a higher body. But they're stopping these processes because they function as the secretariat. So under the previous administration, it was rampant. Under this administration, it continues. And so we're hoping, Marlene, that once we get to the issue of reform and reforming the public sector, that we can properly address the Public Service Commission to ensure that that commission functions as it should. Currently, every single individual other than the union appointee is a politically handpicked individual. That's the sad reality.
But with a union representative there, you are able to know definitively whether or not, a person having a political alignment doesn't mean that their behavior will be, well, I should say, we would hope they would be able to differentiate whatever subscription they have to a political party in the actions or duties they're asked to execute. Having a union representative there, you know if that's the motive, or you'd be made aware.
Well, we would be made aware, and at times we are made aware. But like I said, the current representative on the Public Service Commission for the Ministry of, for the Public Service Union, his term is coming to an end. We will be definitely looking, I will say as president, I am not totally satisfied with his reporting. I make no apology to say that, because I am not satisfied with his standard of reporting and his engagement with the union. So definitely we will be seeking, or under my leadership, I will be putting forward a motion for a new replacement to be placed there to ensure exactly that, Marlene, that we ensure that that commission functions to the best of its ability, or as much as possible in an autonomous and independent fashion.
Going back to the two new positions in terms of the DHS, what sort of involvement does the union expect to have in terms of identifying and filling those two new positions?
Interesting. I took the liberty, and forgive me for all this paper here, but I took the liberty
we
because
like documentation.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, and thanks for that. I took the liberty to just highlight a section of the PSR which speaks to promotion. A public officer shall not be promoted to a post for which he is not qualified. The commission, in considering the promotion of a public officer to fill a vacancy, shall base its decision on the following. So I'm hoping that for those two posts, that individuals who are highly qualified and competent will be promoted to those posts in accordance with regulation. Now, will Dr. Manza be offered one of those posts? I don't know, because the information is conflicting.
I was going to ask, doesn't that now make him redundant if his post no longer exists?
His post has been made redundant,
yes,
by virtue of what they have done. However,
what's in the process, yeah.
Does the duties of the Director of Health Services, are those duties abolished? No, they're simply being split. So the post is redundant. He's not redundant. So perhaps we can do a quick review of Minister Shabat's comment. He'll know, and I think he made this declaration on your show, he would be in charge of what they refer to as international affairs in the ministry. Now, I don't know where international affairs fall within the whole scope of these two posts. Clearly, those posts do not speak directly of international affairs, so it wouldn't appear that he will be the holder of one of those posts. But the Honorable Shabat also said that, and where is that? Yeah. As it relates to Dr. Manzanero, he has been offered one of the directorates, but he's yet to respond. The Prime Minister goes on to say there is communication.
Did you confirm that with Dr. Manzanero? Or we don't know
As
yet?
late as last night, I have been in contact with Dr. Manzanero. There has been absolutely no communication with Dr. Manzanero since March of this year. Not by the Minister, not by the Ministry, not by the Prime Minister. So I printed off these news clips of the Prime Minister talking about conversation, the Minister talking about making an offer, you know, and all of these things are misleading and deceitful because there's no truth to them. Absolutely no truth to them. There is no truth to that he has been offered something, one of the director posts. So I'm not here to call the Prime Minister and the Minister of Health a liar. I'm here to simply prove that their comments to this country is untrue, and it begs a lot, it leaves a lot to be desired coming from those officers.
Well, you know, I think one of the things is you're clearly saying, and that's why I said documentation matters. Had there been conversations or correspondence written, they would be able to provide that. But the matter is, and coming back to it, because you said that the expectation is that while the post of Director of Health Services will now be deemed, once this process is finalized with the amendments, will now be deemed redundant, it doesn't make the person currently holding the post redundant, which means he is eligible for one of these posts, especially given his rank within the public service. Let's talk about other options. I've heard you say publicly before that based on the current structure, those who now hold deputy director posts should be the persons assigned to this post. Explain that for us.
That is the process or the structure that is in place. The public service regulations informs you that when a vacancy arises, you ought to do an assessment to see if you can fill those posts from within. You do not simply run outside and try to bring in new people. You try to fill those posts from within. If there is nobody competent and able enough within the wider public service, then you go out and you find that person. So that's the simple reason why I brought that section of the regulation, to say that in the coming days, and perhaps in the coming months, we will know whether or not this was always a plan by this administration to bring in individuals from outside to head the Ministry of Health, when in fact we believe that we have competent people inside. There will be a lot of restructuring because clearly these deputies, their post itself will have to now change, which brings me to a very interesting question. You have two directors. Now, who's in control? Who are the boss? And if I am a deputy or a middle manager, who do I report to? If I'm not happy with this director, which the legislation as it appears seems to
what's
put
the new
both of them
organizational
here.
structure?
Will one be placed on 27 and create another anomaly as we have with the current director of BTS, and one be placed on 25 or 26? I don't know. And I mentioned 25 and 26 because it's important for the Belizean people to know that these new posts will cost us within the region of $80,000 to $83,000 per year. That's approximately almost $7,000 per month. So we're not to deal with small change here. On time when on government, they tell public officers that there is no money, that they have to strong arm 10%, that they have to cut the supplies. In the appropriations bill yesterday, I was hoping that $30 million would have been allocated for the return of our 10%, because clearly the actions, these type of actions, do not suggest that there's any real intention by this administration to control the wage bill and to restrict the unnecessary hiring within the Ministry of Public Service. And while I'm on that, Marlene, I must also point out that since November, we have credible information that even the fisheries administrator, who is a HOD, has not been functioning in her substantive post. She is currently assigned to a unit, project unit. We haven't heard much noise about that. And one must ask the question, why haven't we heard what's happening in the Ministry of Blue Economy, whereby the fisheries administrator is now within a unit? And there's a lot of rumors surrounding there why no noise is coming out of there, but I'll report back to you if another anomaly is concerned there.
Not only, well, I mean, I still, the union plays such an important role. And I know we've spoken before about the need for membership to grow and for people to understand what the regulations set out for public service. So the reporting structure when things don't go according to plan is something that should be, I would imagine, a system that you have working well. So hearing about it and then actually having complaints come up to the union, why is that? Why is there that disconnect?
Again, when I joined the Public Service Union, I took every opportunity to attend meetings and to inform myself as to the role and functions of the union. So I know how the union is supposed to operate. Unfortunately, a lot of our public officers are not well versed with their roles and responsibility, not only their rights. They're well versed of their rights, but a lot of them are not well versed with their roles and responsibility. And part of that role and responsibility is to ensure that the system functions properly. And one of your watchdogs within the system is the Public Service Union, because we have a direct link with the government via the grievance procedures, which stems because of these irregularities and irregular type practices. But and also there is the issue of confidence. There is the issue of confidence. A lot of public officers have expressed during conversations, whether in the past or present, that you know what, they do not have confidence in releasing information, and hence the reason why we've been pushing for the Whistleblowers Act. So that, fine, you don't have confidence in releasing this information to executives within the union or leaders within the union, then you can do it via the Whistleblowers Act.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us what happens now.
What happens now, of course, Marlene, is that we look to see how the Ministry of Health improves based on this new proposal. There's a lot of issues going on there. Our nurses are suffering. And I want to say to our nurses this morning that we hear your cry, where the overtime situation. Yesterday I received a barrage of texts that it would appear that there's now issues again with the nurses overtime and the people within the Ministry of Health overtime in terms of how it's being calculated. Nurses study leave are being denied. We have are being not denied, sorry, but is being threatened. We have nurses who have qualified to study in Taiwan. The process for them to get their approval, the school year has passed. They're still here. Why would we not be supporting the professionalization of, why would we be putting in place all the roadblocks to stop these people? Yeah. So with nurses, we have to, so I want to say to our nurses that we're addressing their case, especially how they're being treated. And we will see how these new 2 posts now impacts on the overall enhancement and improvement in the Ministry of Health, which I will say has always been one of our headaches in terms of ensuring that it's functioned properly. So that is what we will do forward. And I end off by saying the month of November ends on Friday. And to date, the Public Service Union nor the joint unions have received any correspondence from the Office of the Prime Minister as it relates to our 6 months financial review of government finances to deal with the projection on our 10% cut. And I want to say to public officers that we're on that ball. The joint unions are having discussions, and we await between now and Friday to see if we will hear from the government for us to do a comprehensive review on what has occurred since November to now as it relates to government finances so that they can get back their 10%, or else we may very well have to start talking about oiling our machinery once again.
Well, Dean, thank you for coming in. We covered a lot in such little time, but there is still much more to discuss. But thank you for sharing your perspective.
Thank you very much, Marlene. Thank you, Belize. It's always a pleasure, and I'm always available.
All right.
And looking forward to future conversations. Thank you.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take our break. And as October comes to an end, we must have this conversation about cancer awareness in our country. We'll have that after the breaks. Please stay tuned.
This COVID update was brought to you by Fulltech Systems, your technology center, where you'll come for the price, but stay for the service.